Chapter 7, Healing. Sen roused him from his rest, parched and barely cohesive. He mashed the berries and fed it to her along with some water. He also forced her awake long enough to apply the poultice to her chest, which he stepped outside for while she did it herself. When she called out to him, he returned and helped her get comfortable. Seeing her so sick and worn out worried him, and he sought Elder Healer. He bowed as he greeted the elder and spoke gently. What caused her to be sick? Elder Healer swayed as he took care of another tree, shifting the dirt around it and removing some decay that had blighted. Travel. She is in foreign land and had been stressed. The answer was straightforward and simple. The way Healer was relaxed about it meant it wasn't life-threatening, but it was strange how exhausted she seemed. Is it normally this bad? He asked, and Healer paused. Normal, no, but in her case, yes. She doesn't smell of cures, so isn't used to being sick. Sheltered most likely, Healer relayed. Bard slumped. If that was the case, how would she handle their journey? I will give you a recipe. Give it to her daily to ward off illness. Really? There is something like that? Close. Make sure she eats well. She likely will handle illness better. But you need more education, Healer said conclusively. Bard already agreed on that front. He bowed and watched and learned from Healer. Healer did as he promised and gave him a recipe, though it would be hard to always have those supplies on hand. That meant Kai would need to carry more, and they were already pushing his capabilities as is. But if Sen was sick, then they would be slowed down anyway. Bard gritted his teeth and prepared the medicine. Though, he wasn't sure if he could call it that. It was like medicine, included herbs and potent foods, but it was a consumable unlike most medicines he was familiar with. It could be possible to coat it with a preservative like honey, and stifolin powder, so it wouldn't stick to other things. He consulted with Healer, who had no objections to the concept. If he could preserve some, then perhaps they could take less time since he could forage in abundance, and not have to hunt for it daily. When he returned to Sen, he fed her, changed out the poultice to keep it strong, and wiped down her exposed skin as best he could. She would need to bathe when her strength returned, to clean off the illness. By the end of the day, she could keep her eyes open for about an hour, but that was tiring for her. Sleep is what she would need, and there wasn't much he could do about it. Days passed. The routine was the same with minor differences, namely her improvement, and his topics of study. When she was able to sit up in bed, she wanted to move about, but Bard made sure she rested another day. The day she was allowed out and about, she mused how she still struggled to smell things, since her nose was stuffy, but now, she felt much better. She wanted to try to get a token. Healer visited that day and Sen was a bit too eager. Elder, Bard said you instructed him to help me recover. Thank you, she said, and Bard reached over and grabbed her shoulder. Healer isn't much for talking. He prefers song. Sen seemed surprised, but when Healer didn't say a word, not in rebuttal or confirmation, Sen seemed to grasp it. She listened for a while and Bard was able to pick up on the pleased melody that Healer sung, probably to see Sen healthy again. Sen sighed deeply at the song and smiled. She then began to hum a tune in harmony with it, as if she was grateful to be healed. Bard listened as the two sung back and forth without words. He knew she would instinctively catch on to this, having watched her interactions with the trees back home, both before he was captured and when he was in that cell. Without too much surprise, Sen followed Elder Healer and he started to show her many things. They sang as they worked, and he used a branch or root to indicate where to look and which parts she should pay attention to. Bard could hardly follow how fast they were communicating in song. It was strange to see Healer move so quickly, but perhaps it was because Sen could sing, and he could not. He would have to listen and play the flute or other instrument he had on hand. She could use her voice. He felt a slight bit of envy, but he reminded himself this was natural and dryads would have an edge over him in this. It's partially why they specialized in all things relating to plants and woods. Their way was as natural as the land itself. Once again days passed, Sen following Healer around and he having her test and try things. Bard assumed she was learning healing crafts specific to her race, as Bard would need her to be knowledgeable in a short time frame. He also wanted her to have some independence, as he wasn't exactly sure what to do with someone who was used to following orders and not thinking for themselves on the road. He was sure she did this because she lacked experience and knowledge, something he had gained from the elders, but the past two elders hadn't been super helpful on that front. Hela was the first who took the time to teach her and spend it with just her. Though, Bard wondered how long this would go on. They still had the rest of their journey to go on. They had a mountain range to pass through, and that would be difficult if not impossible when winter came. Sen continued to study under Hela as the weather became more cold. Some trees lost a few leaves, but it was more prominent up in the hills to the northwest. The southwest held the evergreen pines. Bard sighed. There was no token for approval with Hela, and it made sense if you knew his core principles. But that also meant that Sen would have to fully learn the healing arts for her race. A single tree approached Bard and he smiled. Hela's assistant. It had been a long time since they had worked together. At the very least, he would rotate and restock the herbs he carried, and have some prepared that Sen could use as well. Drying took time, so while there was still enough warmth and sunlight, he would work as well. At the 30th day, Sen was observing the winter growths as they began to peek their heads. These plants didn't have much herbal or medicinal use, but when in full bloom, they shone the rare light in this dark wintry landscape. It could not be harvested or used in forest craft, so it remained one of the true natural wonders of this land. Bard somewhat was regretful they couldn't stay to see it, but with a deadline to their travels, he couldn't wait and enjoy the landscape. Perhaps after their marriage, he would bring her to his favorite spots from his travels. He mused over it. It would take a few years at the longest, supposing he traveled in the correct order, but if he missed and something stalled them, it would take longer. He lamented that he wasn't an artist and could draw what he had seen. He could only share stories and compose songs to convey how he felt while he saw them. Bard approached, crouching to look at the growths. Sen briefly glanced at him before reaching out and tapping one of the buds. "I wonder what they will look like," she asked, and Bard sighed. "A pale blue-white that glows an ethereal light in the persistent dark," Bard explained. "Even the stalks are white and create an illusion of snow on the ground. I'd love to see it," Sen muttered. Her control of her language skills was getting better. Their nightly storytelling was helping with that. "As soon as you get your token, we need to get to the next elder," Bard said as he reached out his hand. She took it and he helped her to rise. "Why so urgent? You do know what snow is, right?" he asked, and she laughed as she reached up and pulled his head down to touch foreheads. "Of course I do, silly. It falls in winter and is cold and wet. You can mold it to make all sorts of things. Well, it's really hard to travel through since it's cold and wet, and we have some mountains to pass through." "Mountains?" Sen asked, puzzled, and Bard pointed to the hills where the leaves were changing color. "They are much taller than those hills, and they attract more snow than normal. It can get several feet deep. We wouldn't be able to get to the ground and make a suitable campsite with them, and we would burn through more resources and supplies in that environment." Sen looked at him shocked, stepping back a bit to look at his expression. She seemed sure that he was being honest and serious about the situation, so she sought out Hela and sung with him. She waved to Bard and he came over. "Hela says it will be a few days at best, but if we are worried about the snows then he apologizes, but this year, the snow will come early in the north." "What?" Bard asked as he looked up at Hela and stumbled back as he sighed and looked skyward. Another stumbling block for their journey. "Do the best you can, Sen." She nodded and set to work with Hela while Bard made his way to the river. Kai was happily fishing there and Bard watched as he mulled over the revelation from Hela. How would they deal with the mountains now? As if sensing his inner turmoil, Kai paused his fishing and shook off his water on his back before approaching. Bard smiled wanly as Kai nuzzled him with a low hum of concern. "Hey Kai, looks like Hela knows the snow will come early this year. What are we going to do?" Kai looked at him pitifully and sat in the low water. The impact caused some of it to splash on his legs, and Bard quickly swiped the water off so that little would soak in. They couldn't stay here, but it would be dangerous to venture into those mountains. Perhaps they could take the long way around, but there was an elder in those mountains, so they would have to backtrack. Bard thought about building a shelter at the base of the valley entrance and waiting out the storm, but that would limit their hunting abilities and gathering to survive. Mountains also had a longer time of retaining the snow, so not only was it coming in early, it would stay late and delay their plans. He wondered if he should have chosen the other path as he contemplated the situation. Kai stayed by him as he voiced his worries. He was a bit resentful of Sen. She probably learned at a relaxed and easy pace, unaware of the situation. But he couldn't really blame her. He hadn't told her of the snows or the mountains, and she had found out the snow would come early so he could plan some things ahead of time, instead of getting caught unawares. "What are your thoughts?" Bard asked Kai. Kai seemed unusually happy to have him conversing with him, and he silently chided himself. He hadn't spent as much time with him since Sen came in, and they had a destination in mind. "And I'm sorry for ignoring you the past month," Kai harumphed as if saying it was no trouble. He then paced back and forth, and Bard retreated from the edge a bit so he wouldn't get splashed by the stray drops. Finally Kai stopped and put his paw in front of Bard. Bard watched as Kai moved some rocks in the river and formed a small mound. "Is this the mountain?" Bard asked, and Kai barked happily. He pulled around his tail and shot a few quills at the mountain, almost detailing a path through it. Bard hunched as he watched, thoughtful. Kai then pulled the quills out and placed them in the water upstream, and Bard watched them divert around the mountain. "You are right, we could go around it," Bard mused. "But you are forgetting the ruins and the human settlements. They would kill Sen if they saw her, and likely us as well." Kai nodded and then placed the top of his head in the water. It was comical to watch, and Bard suppressed a chuckle. Kai then came up and smoothed down his wet fur before wagging his tail. Bard stared and thought for a moment. "Are you saying we should disguise her?" he asked, and Kai nodded before barking happily. "Her hair does make her stand out, but its fall colors are closer to human hair colors. Let's hope her winter colors are also similar." "It's not a bad idea, but just being near the mountains will increase the storms and snow," Bard pointed out. Kai nodded with a shrug. He did have a point. Besides being a possibility, it would allow them to move forwards. "What about the elder in those mountains?" Bard asked, reminding him. Kai huffed a sigh and shrugged. He put his muzzle against his chest, and Bard gave the forehead a rub. "I know, there aren't easy answers." "Dinner?" Sen's voice came across the way, and Bard rose. Kai retreated and grabbed his fish before joining them. Toasted mushrooms, a bit of rehydrated meat, and an assortment of berries and nuts. Kai cleaned the fish, and the bones were given to the trees, who would find a way to compost it for themselves. "Tomorrow is washing day," Sen said happily, and Bard noted how happy she seemed about it. "Changed your mind about water?" he asked, and she gave him a telling look. "I still don't like them, but after getting as grimy as we have, then it is nice, if not cold. Besides, Healer said I need to be clean to receive the token, and he said it will help me stay healthy." "You sure talk as if he speaks a lot," Bard remarked. "Well, he does sing a lot," Sen said, and Bard wished he could truly understand that tree. Sen said he sang, but even she admitted it was mostly conjecture based on the song and what he pointed at and showed her. "I'll finally have my first real token," she hummed, and Bard smiled. It was a big accomplishment for her, and he was proud. He just wished their travels weren't weighing him down so he could celebrate with her. As they sat and ate, Sen started the nightly conversation with a story where War Tree moved their village. Bard was fascinated that the trees that made their homes would uproot and move. It was a tactic they used to protect themselves, and while the trees struggled a bit, they took extra care of them to compensate. It did mean that they were safer than stationary villagers, according to her grandfather, but it did mean that she didn't get to stay and enjoy one place for multiple seasons, and sometimes this meant that food changed drastically. Her kind didn't have drying methods, so it was rare to take something you enjoyed with you. Bard somewhat felt sorry for her, but also was proud that he could offer her some of her favorite herbs and seasonings regularly. "It really puts it into perspective," he commented. "What does?" Sen asked after swallowing. "I always thought my travel fare was a bit bland or mundane. I wanted variety, and when I did happen to travel to a human settlement without Kai, I was always jealous of the home cooking I could smell and see there." Sen didn't have much to say about that, just paused and mused on it, staring at the red coals. "Was your cooking that bad?" she asked. "No, just different. They could have more fresh ingredients, and some traded because they could be found regularly. Though the catfolk have the most unique cuisine I've tried." "Is that so?" Sen asked, amused but looking sleepy. Bard told her of his travels with them, but watched her grow more and more sleepy. He smiled as he guided her to the lean-to and let her sleep. He put out the fire and spun his tokens around for an added layer before heading to bed with Kai. The next day, Sen went to the river to bathe, so Bard finished the felted fur fabric he had made from Kai, and used his new stone knife to smooth it out. Kai yawned lazily until they heard a shriek. Bard looked at Kai, who sighed as he got up to check on Sen. Bard listened intently. After nothing more was heard, Bard continued his work. If Sen was in trouble and Kai couldn't help, then Kai would come and grab him. Otherwise, it would be best to stay here and let her have her privacy. When he heard Sen's footfalls, he turned back and saw Sen's soaked figure and wet clothes. She said nothing as she grumbled and started a fire. He could surmise that her dry clothes had fallen in the water, and so she had called out with that shriek, though it could have been other things. There are wild animals out here, so it was also possible. Bard, can you help? She shivered and he noted her cold hands. He chuckled as he got up. Sure, get wet enough. More than plenty. A deer thought my clothes looked nice and rubbed his antlers off on them. They then fell in the water. She griped and Bard laughed. He patted her head, noting that her hair, since it was wet, didn't move around as much. He couldn't stop thinking about his conversation with Kai as he began to draw the bow drill. He concentrated as Sen put out kindling before growling in discomfort. As the smoke began to appear, he took the cinders and placed them gently into a little nest and blew. It smoked heavily, until it caught, and he placed it in the pit, and grew the fire to full form. Sen quickly tried to put her hands out over the heat inside. As Bard rose, he stopped behind her and paused. Sen, what color will your hair be in winter? White, like the silver branches of my home. He hummed in contemplation. What are you thinking about? She asked and Bard paused. He sighed as he grabbed the felted material and knife. He pulled it closer to the fire, keeping it away from the open flames. He kept his back to the pit as he began to work again. Do your people ever braid or pin their hair? My father and grandfather do, but that would be the only ones I know. Well, the ones who have dead hair like dead hair. You've mentioned that before. Well, when a forest dies, the dryads of that forest, their hair dies too. It was autumn when Defender's sister died, so that's why they have yellow hair forever. I was born in Defender's forest, so my hair matches the trees. While it is alive, it keeps out of my face, but when it is dead, it's like my hair. Bard supplied and Sen nodded. Dead? She twisted herself a bit and pulled on her clothes to bring them closer to the fire. Why do you ask? Bard's attention was caught by her simple frame that was more tightly clinging to the clothes. She was so thin. Was she eating enough? He shook his head and looked at the felt. Since the snow would cause trouble, we might travel a different route. And that means traveling near some human settlements. Bard answered. He moved his knife across the felt, taking out a knotty portion and then patted it smooth. I was thinking of braiding your hair to keep it from moving around, but if your hair is white, it would still stand out. White isn't a common color among the humans. Oh, but do you know how to braid? Sen asked. I don't. It's not much different from rope, I would assume, he said offhandedly, and Sen shifted again to warm up another side. The conversation lapsed and Bard pulled and moved the felt. Bard, why can't I use a fire stick to warm up? She asked and Bard sighed. The plants to make those are out of season on the next portion of our route. We want to save them for winter, when it will be too hard to find dry wood for fires. Sen grumbled but relented at that. He watched her shiver and strode to their packs. He found his towel and wrapped her in it. Sen started to protest but Bard stopped her and stoked the fire. Can't have you getting sick again, he reminded, and she blushed. She pulled her feet closer as she snuggled into the towel. Thank you. A simple wind began to pick up and Sen shivered. Kai came over and circled around them, becoming a shield from the breeze. Bard noted that his winter coat was coming in nicely. When he was satisfied with his work on the felt, he rose and folded it, packing it away. Sen, where are your old clothes? I'll wash them. He called over to her and he saw her head peek up over Kai, meaning she had climbed up. It's over there. She pointed and Bard peered over his things to see it. Once he spotted it, he picked up the mass and thanked her before preparing his things for washing. Afterwards, he would bathe. The washing and bathing took a good portion of the remaining light, and as he returned, he found Sen standing before Hela and holding out her hands. He was relieved to see Hela gently place the token in her grasp. Sen held onto it as if it was the most precious thing she owned, and she clutched it to her chest. "Thank you," he heard her say. Hela turned and departed, a song that described his delight floating in the air. Bard came over and Sen leaned against him. At first she was calm, but then bounced and turned to show him her token. "I did it," she squealed, and Bard laughed at her enthusiasm. The remaining portion of the day they spent preparing to depart in the morning. No sense venturing into the space of shades and worrying about them, when they could travel better on a good night's rest.